to you if it's Wednesday where you are. Lucky you if you're ahead of me. All right, here I am pasting in the chat window the report. And give me just a moment, I'll share my screen. So this is the development team update for this weekly debrief. We just started our sprint on Monday, and it will end. It's a 2-week sprint that ends March 4th. The priorities are continuing work on consensus stability, as well as feature development of both the wallet and cost accounting, and then refinement in the block storage space. And that work is very much in progress. We had intended to release Node 8.4 at the end of the last sprint and were blocked by a particularly buggy bug. Good news is that bug is fixed, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. At this point, I think it makes the most sense just to continue to hold off on releasing 8.4 until we complete this current sprint. That will bring a lot of feature work into that release. And I think it makes the most sense in terms of time and resource management not to worry about a release right now, but rather to do it at the end of the next sprint. So that's the plan. You're welcome to take a look at the release plan. It will highlight for you what work is currently done and will be included in that release, and we'll continue to update that over time. As always, you're welcome to take a look at our features document describing what will be in Mercury. We are making some small improvements to that, but most of what's there is accurate at this point. Regarding the public testnet, it is not yet available. You're always welcome to take a look at what those blocking bugs are, and they're very much the focus and priority of the team at this point. We are, however, shifting our focus a bit because we do know that there is an end in sight, and that releasing a public testnet is very much something that we want to do and something that we can do in the near future. So we have started work as a team this week and late last week to begin to figure out how to best communicate the plan for the public testnet rollout, what you can expect from that testnet, how we will be launching it, and we look forward to sharing more of those details with you in the near future. Block storage. Thank heavens that PR is in. Kudos to the team for their collaboration and work. There's literally 24-hour coverage on this work at this point because of geography and how the team is working on it. That PR is in, and so now what's happening is some refinement work to support the use of that block storage implementation, and what that will mean for node operators who bring up a node, have the state of the node for whatever reason kill their node, and then can connect without having to catch up entirely to the state of the blockchain. So we're really excited to start playing with that and getting that into a place where node operators can use it as well. Regarding the consensus bug that we chased down for a couple of weeks, it is fixed. That bug was the invalid parents error. Our community testers know that one well. And you are welcome to take a look at what the fix was for that by selecting the JIRA ticket, and we'll point you to a lot more information than I'm going to go into here. But one of the outcomes of that was a change in the use of the estimator in consensus, and thinking about, instead of using the last finalized block as part of that estimator, rather instead using the greatest common ancestor in that estimator. And so there is work happening right now related to that, and an investigation of that as a better solution for what's currently fixing the invalid parents error. We are also, as a team, as well as with the community, having conversations related to validator incentives and Casper. It's fairly important to lock off on the decision-making related to this at this point, and get this done before the end of the month, because a lot of the decisions made related to validator incentives result in work that the team needs to do in order to realize validator incentives in the platform, and something that we definitely want to be able to play with in a testnet scenario. So that work is in progress. Cost accounting work is also a focus of this current sprint, and that work is very much in progress. It's a collaborative effort throughout the team. We are seeing some refinement work in Node related to metrics, as Adam is working on the performance test harness and moving away from Prometheus and seeing some discrepancies between Prometheus and the InfluxDB. He's working with Sebastian in metrics to make some improvements there. The SRE team is, like I said, doing some debugging in Prometheus and InfluxDB, and also working to build out the infrastructure and support systems that we're going to need for the public testnet. As a reminder, we had those in place in the Pyrofix environment, and that is something that we have to redo and rebuild in the RChain cooperative environment. Wallet work is also a priority in this sprint, and that work is very much in progress. You're welcome to follow along in Jira. And as always, you can find more details at the website developer.rchain.coop. Does anybody have any questions or requests for more details? Fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. I really appreciate it. So before we move on to some other pieces, I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what's running today, what has been running continuously, and how these things are being rolled out, and more generally how one builds sort of reliable software, especially network software. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen here. So can people see this little diagram right here?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a inside our node, there is effectively access to a comms module, which includes an implementation of Kademlia and other odds and ends. And this is what's used to connect one R node to another without consensus, right? So from here to here, there's a comms layer. If I introduce, our wild and woolly internet, and then connect them. So we have connections between nodes through the comms layer. Oh, that's weird. Let me get rid of that. Oops. Sorry about that. And then so like that. This out of the way for a minute. So this is effectively one path between nodes, and this is the most basic path for node discovery and node communication. Then in addition to a comms layer, there's a local storage, which is what we call R space. And that local storage has an image in memory and an image on disk. And then Rolang effectively is interpreted in terms of actions you can do with respect to the local storage. And that is because the local storage solution is unlike other kinds of databases, in the sense that you don't just store data. You can store code that's in flight. So code that is sort of partially evaluated is also stored in the database, and that's what gives the semantics for Rolang. So RSpace is effectively the core of the interpreter for Rolang. So that makes Rolang not just a smart contracting language, but also a query language for a special kind of database. Which is why it has some interesting properties. But the important piece of what I'm trying to tell you is that all of this has been pounded on for decades. So the RSpace implementation derives from Galertner's tuple spaces, of which there were multiple implementations in the 90s, and on top of Java realizations. The Kademlia package associated with the comms layer is also a well understood technology that's been pounded on for many years. Rolang, the math goes back at least 30 years, and there have been multiple implementations, many of which I've personally done. So all of this stuff here is well understood by, in software development terms. This is all well understood, and What's not well understood, or what's considerably less mature, is the Casper piece, right? So Casper wasn't even a gleam in anybody's eye until about 2015. It's 2019. It wasn't even sort of something you could call a protocol until about 2016. So that's 3 years in software development terms for protocols. Just so people have a comparison, so a yardstick to measure by. The high watermark protocol, which is what sits at the heart of TCP, it took 25 years to get that right. So just so people understand kind of relative timeframes. Now, when we talk about what's running today versus what we want to run, let me just get rid of all right, so here we go. So the piece that, for example, RSong uses by far, because it limits the number of nodes that are deployed, is primarily this piece, okay? So, and this piece is solid. This piece inside our implementation is relatively stable and relatively solid. I mean, it's a fresh code base, so I'm not gonna say there aren't any bugs, but this piece here, let me just really highlight that for you. Hang on a second. There we go. So that piece there is relatively solid and has been in continuous operation now. The RSong application, which hits against this, has been in continuous operation since October. And whenever we have a new release, Kayvon goes and makes sure that RSong is on the latest node code, so that we're never out of sync. And this is a good test of what's happening with respect to our software. Because if our software were not to be able to support this most basic application, that would be a serious digression, right? So this is very, very common in software development, to have a sort of very hefty test of some core features. The other piece of software development that's very, very common is to not have everything go all at once. So you get a certain number of features working end to end, and you make sure that as you add new features, those end-to-end features don't degrade. So that's the other piece of what we're doing here. So the deployment that we have that's backing RSong is exactly that. It keeps us sure that what we consider stable remains stable. So we have end-to-end, an end-to-end scenario that's working and keeps working as we add more features. So that's why sort of the end of the tunnel is now in sight. That's because the real piece of the puzzle that is sort of the most risky is Casper, and we're coming up on most of the features that make Casper tick. I will say that I'm lumping in the cost accounting with Casper, and effectively you should say that cost accounting is correlated to throttling this execution here, but because it's a part of economic security, I'm lumping it in with Casper. But this is core to software development. You don't ever go big bang, all the features all at once, and hope to hell that you got it all right. You do it in piecemeal fashion, and you make sure that you've got a big, reasonable chunk that works, and you can be coding against it. And this is why we've said repeatedly that if you have a DApp, most DApps are going to be written against Rolang. They don't ever access Casper directly. They don't access RSpace directly. They don't access the cost accounting directly. They don't access the comms directly. The API to the whole system from the DApp's point of view is Rolang, right? That's actually key to the whole architecture. This is built on terms of in terms of smart contracts, and then externalities such as other business logic or other applications. But the API to the node effectively is via smart contracts, which means they hit Rolang, which means that since September, when RSong was written, anyone who wanted to write a DApp the system was ready for them to write dApps. And they could have been writing it sooner. I mean, we began writing RSong in July. But certainly, since September, anyone who wishes to write a DApp can and should be doing so, because most of what needs to be exercised is through Rolang, and that's been ready for and open for business since September. So this is why we have encouraged everyone to write dApps and get as much done as they can in terms of their application logic. The rest of this stuff, from the point of view of a dApp, like any one of the portfolio companies, is just an availability play. It's just about making sure that if this one goes down, let me see if I can grab that. Let me get this and then go back here. Right. So if this node goes down for whatever reason, the whole system doesn't go down, because there are a bunch of other nodes within a particular shard that are still live and can carry the load. And in fact, the whole point of the architecture of Casper is that we can suffer fairly catastrophic loss in terms of the total number of nodes that are validating the network, and still make meaningful progress for the dApp. So from the dApp's point of view, all this Casper stuff is completely invisible. The only thing it needs to be doing is to work against Rolang. And again, the point I'm trying to make is that's been up and running continuously without interruption except for a couple of scheduled downtimes since October. So that's why we encourage anyone who's interested in using the network right now to be writing dApps. And the reason is because if we have enough of them, then we can be guaranteed that the whole node is functioning correctly. And the more that we get of these, the more we know that the whole node is functioning correctly, even though their entry point is only through Rolang. So let me stop there and see if people understand what I just said, and if there are any questions about that.
Now, my experience is that, yeah, we're writing apps and they work well with the Rolang, but that we have to clear the R space when we restart a node, or else we lose the registry.
Yeah, that's correct, and that's a part of really the block store work that's being done, and a bunch of other sort of persistence and reliability features that are coming along as a part of Casper. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, this is a comment from Jonathan. I absolutely, first of all, I really thank you for this presentation. I think it helps me understand things, and I hope it helps others as well. With respect to the platform being available and the RSong proof of concept being a generalizable thing, I think that the Shakespeare's phrase that a rose by any other name smells as sweet comes into play here. I think the fact that we have been saying you can use RSong to make other things, and I'm beating a dead horse here, hasn't really helped communicate the fact of its generalizability. And that's why I think that coming up with a name finalizing a name for that generalized architecture that Kayvon and Kent and you created is really important. And to that end, I want to say that there has been a subcommittee that has looked at the 250 plus names that have been submitted by the community, and we're down to 4. And I really hope that the folks that are in that subcommittee will come to a conclusion so we can give this thing a name that conveys that it is in fact a generalizable architecture upon which people can be building.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that that's a reasonable point. Just so that people understand the value add above what's going on here, I'll extend our diagram just a tiny little bit here. So here's a second copy of that diagram, and and now what is it that RSong does, and what is generalizable? So there are 2 pieces to RSong. One is the proxy, and the other is the acquisition. So what acquisition does, and this is the part that's most interesting, is that acquisition provides a means by which, here, let me put them on this side, since there'll be more unfettered access to the components. So what acquisition does is it's effectively a set of smart contracts that allow to take in assets and put them into our space. And those assets are not naked assets. The assets are packaged with metadata. And that metadata says important things about the assets, not just attributions like provenance of the assets, but also things like when these assets are accessed, certain payments have to be issued. They have to be issued to parties that hold the rights to the access. The proxy part is really the conduit by which the player, so let me go ahead and put the player in. So let me grab this bit here, but not that, and move this over a little bit. And then, so just so that people are absolutely clear, we'll go change this to one of these. So some data comes in. So this is an asset, right? And the asset is uploaded through the acquisition. So it's packaged with its metadata and uploaded through acquisition into our space, right? So that's the path that we're interested in there. Let me just quickly grab connection. So we have this one. The asset goes through here and then into the node so that it ultimately resides, the packaged version of the asset ultimately resides inside our space. So this is what we mean when we say that the asset has in fact been stored on chain. So that's the path that's happening there. And then when the player makes a request, the request goes in through the proxy. Right? And the proxy then hits the node and makes a request for the asset and then delivers it. I won't draw the back path because I think you kind of get the idea, and delivers it back to the player, right? And makes it available, and on making it available, accesses the metadata in such a way that any use of it correspond to some transactions out to those parties who hold the rights for the asset. Now, the important thing that we've been saying is this whole architecture is completely insensitive, does not care about what kind of asset it is. It can be any binary data. In fact, it doesn't even have to be binary data. It could be any form of a data blob. And so so we are currently working with a group that presented last week, I believe it was, RChain, or week before last, who want to put as data assets these impressions of fine art. And then instead of a player, what's coming in is a viewer, right? So this viewer is from someone who's selecting a fine art image to be utilized in some other context. For example, printed on a T-shirt, or printed on a postcard, or any of a number of contexts like that. So again, it's the same idea. The fine art asset comes in through acquisition, packaged up with some metadata, and then is stored in RSpace. And then when the viewer comes in to get the asset, it comes in through a proxy that's like this, which knows how to look up the asset together with the metadata and deliver the asset back to the viewer. So it's exactly the same architecture, no matter what the asset is. And this is why we've been talking about this as a generalizable. So I appreciate your point, Jonathan. It's an important one, and notice that for these kinds of data market applications, the cost accounting and the Casper stuff is really just icing on the cake. I was yesterday I was talking with Ravi, our candidate for COO. We had a really good conversation. I'll segue over to that in just a moment. But what he was saying was, my goodness, this is like SAP HANA. Just this piece alone is like SAP HANA. The high performance distributed database that SAP has been vending to its customers quite successfully for the last several years.
So
go ahead.
Sure. So to my understanding, Casper is the piece that is the most experimental and still like unstable, but the rest is kind of already can be used. So my question is there, like, should Casper not work as expected? Is there a kind of plan B to use another consensus or a hybrid way to reach consensus? Or what is, I mean, because I'm not sure how far away we are from getting Casper stable. My question is just, is there a plan B, or is there a way that we can de-risk the uncertainties around the Casper protocol?
Yes, and that's exactly why the architecture is the way it is. We don't actually care so much about the consensus protocol as long as it meets certain features, right? Certain characteristics, and those characteristics have to do with does it require privacy? Can this be a public net, or does it require a private net? Right? Do all the nodes have to know each other? There are issues like that, and that allows you to select amongst your consensus protocols, right? So we are looking for economically secured, leaderless, distributed consensus protocols. So that eliminates things like Paxos. It eliminates things like Raft, but leaves into play other kinds of protocols, and then you start to get a little bit more refined in your selection process. So you don't want the protocol to have hard cliffs in terms of failure modes. So like Tendermint, for example, has a hard cliff where you essentially can get locked up and you have to do a reset, right? So there are liveness issues associated with Tendermint. So liveness is an important thing. And so far, amongst those protocols, Casper is the one that has the most legs. So I'm actually less worried about Casper than I am about any of the other protocols. We know, at this point, we know so much more about these kinds of protocols than we did back in 2015 when we first started thinking about these protocols. And that was after proof of work as a consensus protocol had been into play for 7 years. So I'm actually, I'm not worried about Casper the theory. I'm mostly worried about we're the first ones ever to have ever implemented a variant of Casper for production scale. And so that code base is going to take longer. This stuff, I can tell you personally, I can do this stuff with my hands tied behind my back and blindfolded. I've done it so many times now that I'm, and which is not to say that our team isn't crack and they're amazing. And I'm just astonished at how rapidly they got stuff done. But the reason they're able to get this stuff done is because there's a collective understanding that makes this considerably less mysterious. The collective understanding here is much smaller, right? It's in the heads of a few people, and you can, we know their names and addresses. Whereas this stuff, there are literally thousands of people who understand this stuff. But here, there's really just a handful of people who understand, and because of that, you don't have the 100 monkeys. You only have tens of monkeys. So it's not quite enough to have the zeitgeist effect start to take place with respect to Casper. Long-winded answer, but hopefully I've addressed your concern. Any other questions there?
Yeah, Greg, this is Ian. Can we get this naming out of the way for this framework that provides this digital asset management?
Hey, I'm all for it. Yeah, sure. Let's have some theater.
So
thank you, Ian.
Right. So, I mean, something like this, it's not a consumer-facing product. I don't think it needs a snappy, fuzzy name, but just a descriptive name like RChain decentralized digital asset management framework, or something that just says what it is.
I just don't want to say that in a design discussion.
Yeah, that's highly ironic.
This is so like for me, this is why I like really simple things like either backer, right? Because that's what it is. It's literally the back end of an asset management system, or tracker, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're tracking assets, or record or recorder, right? Because it's short, simple, easy to remember, for engineers who, if you look at this diagram, have a bunch of balls in play, right? I don't want to have to say a 15-syllable thing to refer to a component.
I like Derek's suggestion in the chat.
Oh, it's not mine. Someone else suggested it, but that was the acronym, so I just enjoy that one.
That's easy.
Oh my God, RCat! I love it. RCat. That's
yeah.
My voice won't. Can we just say?
So I like RAMS. If I could put a plug in for RAMS, which would be the RChain Asset Management System. You talk about simple to the point management system. Everybody in the enterprise feels warm and cozy when they hear something like that.
I don't think it sounds good.
Okay,
how about if we just do just like take 2 or 3, or just these 2, and we do voice vote.
Can't we vote? If you open up participants, I think we can vote right there, right?
Yeah, you can raise your hand.
No, there's yes and no also.
Oh, you're right.
So can we try a yes or no on?
Is there any other one that needs to get in real quick? Because I feel good about those 2.
I think it should have something to do with the technology, like RowKit or RowGen.
Can you type it in, Jim?
Those aren't very descriptive, though, for what piece this is.
Well, I mean, are we disenfranchising the community? I mean, didn't the community pick?
I'd like to just chime in and say we've been going through this for weeks. We've identified 4. We just need to put those 4 or 5 names out there and just let the vote take place.
Okay, let's do it. So
to set up the apparatus for the voting mechanism to take place. Let's just do it and knock it out.
All right.
Can we just make sure that our cat is part of the final 5?
I listed the 4 that have been the most popular per the discussions that have been going on the R Thingy Discord channel that the staff has been engaging in. So those 4 are right here. If there's a 5th one, let's throw it in there. Find a platform for the vote and get it done with.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Fabian.
Is our cat one of them? I'm sorry, I didn't hear an answer to that.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm
sorry.
I'm putting it into the everyone chat. Boom. These are the 4.
There you go.
Very good. Okay.
There's a question in the chat from Rick from the conversation that you were having a little bit earlier, Greg. Are you able to see it?
Hang on. I'm going to stop sharing. Maybe I can. Okay. I don't see it. No. What's the question?
I'll read what I see from Rick. This is Casper more of a feature for Venus? Can we get an explanation on the performance differences between Mercury and Venus, and how many stages are planned in total? This was following your discussion of what's stable right now, and then the Casper part that we continue to work on.
Yeah. So so it's not actually, it's not a blockchain unless you have a consensus algorithm. You know, so let me put it this way. This bit here is effectively a distributed code evaluator for a programming language Rolang.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Let me get to, there's that, and do screen share. Okay. Right. So this bit here makes the thing a distributed interpreter, right? And it's an interpreter for the programming language Rolang. Now, the way to think about a blockchain is the blockchain is the consensus bit, right? A blockchain is a mechanism whereby you can have leaderless consensus. And then the question becomes, what do you store? And you can, like, there's lots of good answers about what you store. Like if you go look at the traditional distributed consensus literature, most of them are presented in terms of just all the programs agreeing on a bit, right? And if you look at the way Vlad approached sort of his initial foray into the algorithm, he just did it in terms of, you know, can all the participants in Casper come to when is it safe for them to agree on a single bit, right? That's very traditional, very common, right? Now, as you start to get into more richer value space, well, the Bitcoin says we're going to store a ledger, right? And that has obvious utility. Ethereum says instead of storing a ledger, let's store the state of a virtual machine. And that idea is much better unless you want but unless you decide that virtual machine has concurrent execution, the virtual machine itself becomes a bottleneck for your transactions, and enter the RChain architecture. Okay, so even though I've drawn it like this, in many ways the diagram is upside down, because at the end of the day, it is Casper that is allowing us to decide the common state of our space. So all the nodes are in agreement about what's in our space, and the reason they're in agreement about what's in our space is that the only way anything gets into our space is via a COM event. And Casper is actually making all the nodes in a single shard agree on those COM events. And the COM events are our notion of transaction. So it's not a blockchain until you have a consensus algorithm. It still has utility, and that's what I was trying to say. This part has lots and lots of utility, and from the point of view of dApp developers, this is the only, Rolang is effectively the only thing they care about. They don't care about all the other stuff because they can't access it. There's no API to it. They only care about Rolang. But when it comes to features and rolling things out, we can't honestly say we have a blockchain until we have the consensus bit. So Casper has to go into Mercury, right? There's no economic security of the whole platform without that bit. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay, so as I understand it, Ravi is on the call. Ravi, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Awesome.
Yes, I am.
So good to hear from you. So gentle people, Ravi came to Seattle from the Bay Area yesterday. We had a very good, very intense day of discussion. Ravi came out to the immersion labs and got the demo with Paul, as did I think this was Christian's first time also to see the demo. So that was you can get their impressions as well. And then we talked at length with a portion of the team on lots of different options, both from the business perspective and from the technical perspective. And so I'm going to turn it over to Robbie to kind of introduce himself to the community and sort of where we are in the process with Robbie. So Robbie, take it away.
The experience of real tech when I actually came into immersion lab, and then so there's the audio piece of technology, and then what our song can potentially do to the market. I was blown away. I'm not an audiophile, as Chris and Greg would tell you, but I was actually really impressed with how a new codec can change and revolutionize the music industry, and then what our song, leveraging RChain, can bring to the music industry. I mean, the potential is huge. I look at technology from a technology perspective and say, okay, where can this be applied? And and we've discussed hardcore engineering aspect of what you guys have accomplished till date. I genuinely believe there is opportunities in the enterprise tech space, as Greg was alluding to earlier, what the decentralized database would do, and then what SAP HANA, which is now in the billions of dollars in the market cap perspective, what a technology like this can enable, let's say, a CRM system or a logistics business. I mean, just think of all the plethora of opportunities that exist. I'm truly blown away with the tech that you guys have actually built. My background, I'm an engineer by training. I was a programmer for the first 8 or 9 years of my career. After that, I've been on the product management side and sold one of my startups to CenturyLink, which is in the managed service provider. I've always been in the hardcore enterprise software, but I had my stint with music when I ran MySpace, a developer platform upon which MySpace Music was built. So had my fair share with the indie music community back in 2008 and 9. And most recently, I was the chief product officer and chief business officer for a Japanese telecom company called NTT. So my responsibility there was to look at R&D technologies. So we spent about $2.5 billion every year on R&D. And my responsibility there was to guide the engineering teams into designing new products, platforms that could be leveraged at large, and how to commercialize them in the sense whether it's a build, buy, partner with enterprise companies. And that's what I was actually looking after. I just quit in the month of January to take a sabbatical, but the sabbatical didn't really happen. I ran into Greg, and I was blown away with the tech that you guys have. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer. I'm in the process of discussing my role and responsibility with Greg, and we had a great conversation yesterday. And thanks to Bill and Chris for joining the meeting yesterday as well. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
Don't be shy, folks.
Oh, I think it's nice to have you here, Robbie. I mean, you speak the right language, the language of business, and that's the part that we need for sure.
Hey, Robbie, this is Jacob. And I was wondering, from your understanding of the technology, how many years does it take to get something like this to the market? And obviously, RChain is very different than anything else. So your insights appreciated.
So, this is actually a constant conundrum that every technology team has. I don't think you need a full-fledged product to go to market. Again, this is a general comment about software engineering. You really, it's inch by the inch. Make one feature work, make it work very well, and then add on the next feature or functionality that you're looking for. I'm sure all of you have been developers in larger enterprises or smaller companies. You never take a full product which is like, rock solid, works all the time to the market. So to answer your question in a shorter way, I think the product, the technology that you have in RChain can be commercialized today. You need to fine tune the use case and then work with the right partners. And that's the proof of work that as a concept that you guys call it. Our song is a proof of concept. Proof of work, where you're actually demonstrating the ability of what RChain has today with what immersion networks have from a codec perspective. So I think the answer is you can take it to market today. It's a matter of all of us coming together and saying, this is where our energy is going to go the next, say, 3 months, 4 months, and then work towards it. You might not have all the functions ready. You might not have all the features ready. It might not be enterprise grade either. I mean, in this case it is, but you might not necessarily have things enterprise grade. But you have to find the right partner who is willing to work with you and who understands and has a good understanding of the technology to say, yes, this has legs, so we can double down on this company. So I feel confident that the tech is ready.
Hi, Ravi. This is Nora. I have a question about just your history with MySpace Music. I'm just curious about your personal interest in blockchain and more decentralized solutions, especially to the music industry, and how you sort of came over to this side of thinking, because obviously there's a little bit or a lot of resistance from that side, from sort of the corporate sort of centralized side, especially within the music industry, to adopt sort of new systems. And I think a lot of them sort of postulate as being interested in giving more power to artists, but I don't think that in earnest they're really ready to do that. So I was just curious about how you came into this space and a little bit about what inspires you.
Yeah, sure. I think, again, MySpace was the first, I would say from my perspective, first attempt made at decentralizing things. And the monetization is where at the end of the day, artists would love for their community to enjoy music the way they want the music to be heard, but economics have to work out. MySpace was the first attempt at getting all the indie artists together to give them a platform to engage with their audience. The monetization mechanism sort of failed from my perspective. The way the monetization was working at MySpace was we were doing a rev share of the ad dollars that MySpace was bringing to the platform. So there was a platform cost, there was engineering costs, and then the artist would get 3% of the ad revenue that they would end up making based on the number of hits that their page got. It was still better than nothing for the artists. They were already releasing, they were playing music in other areas. So they made some money, but not as much as we thought they would. The artists that had the highest number of fan following obviously had a lot more hits on the site, and so they ended up making more money. Now, the decentralization aspect of it, yes, I think the market is ready from that perspective. Their availability of tools and technologies exists in the market. Everybody's equipped with a phone at this point in time. They're free to download an app. So the distribution exists at this point in time. So if somebody were to come and release the music exclusively on our song, and if you had a good enough artist who has enough fan following, then the propensity of them to download the app is higher at this point in time. That means the distribution technologies exist, and this distribution technology did not exist in 2006, 2008 when MySpace was relevant. So I believe that the market is ready. The ecosystem is ready. And look, every one of us want a decentralized system. Nobody likes to have a monopoly on. Nobody wants a centralized. Whether you talk about financial sector or whether you talk about the music industry. I mean, we all want a decentralized, highly regulated, but regulated by a community. So I still believe that the vision of MySpace, where we wanted all the indie artists to succeed and make money, I think blockchain as a technology is going to enable that. So blockchain is an enabler, and in the ecosystem where it has come up with tools and technologies like your phones and your app stores that are available, them coming together is, I think, the time is right for the market.
Yeah, I completely agree because I grew up on MySpace. So just hearing all this from you is pretty cool. So anyway, I look forward to talking to you about all this stuff a lot more.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Ravi. We have about 8 minutes left in the call. Let's see, I want to mention a few other things. So we're currently vetting a team to help us sort of relieve some of the pressure on Kayvon. Kayvon is simultaneously maintaining the RSong infrastructure and pushing that, a little, doing some basic maintenance on that stuff, and while at the same time helping out the exactly Kayvon 2020, while also working on the core protocol and helping out there. So we're looking at outsourcing to a team to help with the maintenance and a little tiny piece of feature development so that there's a front end to the intake experience for people who want to upload songs. And the reason we want to do that is because one of the things that we've seen in the press when people go and look at RSong, the first thing they say is, "Oh, well, there's only 3 songs." So we want. So Rick was asking. I thought we want all devs in house. We want all devs on core protocol in house, but none of the work on the RSong backend is core protocol. That's all a DApp. So that's and what we're trying to do is to free up Kayvon so that he can spend more time on core protocol. So that's why that's an important.
And also demonstrate that other teams can easily work with the proxy layer and acquisition layer, right, Greg?
That's exactly right. So
within 2 weeks max,
Exactly. So one of the things that we wanted to demonstrate, and what we did demonstrate when Kayvon came into RChain, he was completely unfamiliar with the node software, right? And this was again by design. So we wanted to see how someone who didn't know the node software how long it would take them to come up to speed to build a DApp from scratch, right? And what we were able to do was to show that with a little bit of help, I mean, obviously Kayvon is a brilliant developer, but with just a little bit of help coming from the core team, what can a developer who doesn't know anything about the node software do in terms of developing a DApp? So we had one data point, which was that Kayvon plus a little bit of support can do about 6.5 weeks develop a DApp, right? Which is very, very impressive, right? I mean it's super, super impressive to see that we can get a data market app of this caliber in about 6 weeks, right? That means that your average Y Combinator fueled team of kids living on ramen in their garage can get to a blockchain based MVP on top of RChain in a very short order, right? And we're sort of running that experiment again with another team. So we're saying, instead of starting from scratch, start with whatever it is, RAMs or RCAD or whatever we want to call it. So starting with that, tweak it and make it work for fine art digital assets, right? And the claim is that it should be on the order no longer than 4 person weeks, which means 2 calendar weeks of two engineers' time to take it from something that works with audio to something that works with these fine art impressions. So that's the idea. And again, it's an important data point for us, because what we're trying to show is that not only does it have all these wonderful features, like, you know, it's a better query language, it's a high performance database, it's got micro transactions baked in. That's all great stuff. But hey, if it takes your developers longer to get to market, that's a serious knock against your platform. So what we want to do is to prove that using our stuff, even with the documentation in the state that it's in, developers can get to market faster, right? It takes them less time to get to market, right? So that's what we want to prove out. And you know, we think we're on the right track, but that's something that we want some hard data on. So does that make sense, Rick?
I would say it makes sense to me.
Okay, awesome. We've only got like 3 minutes left, knowing that we have to be very careful what we say on air. Christian, did you want to just share your impressions of what you saw?
Yeah. At what immersion or the conference I went to during the weekend?
Well, hey, I think we've heard lots about immersion. Tell us about the conference.
Yeah, so I would just say that like I went to the NEO conference this week, and I can at least say that NEO is searching for some of the solutions that we already have, which puts us in a position of strength. I do understand there's a sensitive nature with regards to how certain actors feel about NEO or other blockchain projects, but I think there's immense opportunity to potential with not only enterprise projects, but other blockchain projects in the space. Overall, the conference was pretty good. NEO is opening a office in Seattle soon, and at least what I got out of it was hopefully three meetings. One with a company called Certec, which is doing security for nodes, and also has basically all the back-end partnerships with exchanges. And then two other former Microsoft employees, one language designer and another one who now works at NEO, left Microsoft in 2016. So yeah, overall pretty good. And you know, team's professional. That the event planning, and you can check out the talks on Coin Interview if you want to watch them. So that's it.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Oh, so Jacob wants to know. I have to jump really soon, but you guys can keep going. Jacob,
yeah, I can leave the room open for like 10 minutes, I guess, if you want.
Yeah. So with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. I'll let you guys keep talking. But thanks again. I think we had a really good stand up, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week.
Okay, I'd like to give a RChain Asia update. I've got a tremendous amount going on here.
Oh, please! I'm so yes. I'm going to stick around for at least one more minute.
Okay, well, Greg, you just listen to the recording, and you and I should catch up anyway, one-on-one.
Perfect. Okay, I'll do that then.
Okay, right. I'm going to keep this as brief as possible. I've actually got about 20 minutes of significant stuff, but in brief, we have MOUs almost fully written with Korean government, Korean industry, and Korean blockchain advocacy groups for a whole bunch of stuff. And this is all revenue generating opportunities. And I have in the background been communicating with RChain platform partners to alert them of their possibilities of being included in the MOU, such that they can start implementing real world applications for smart cities and other collaborative applications. There is a MOU with one of the biggest universities in Korea to develop a to co-submit grant proposal to the Korean government for a possibly $2.5 million R&D facility for general blockchain things of specific interest to RChain. And also we have a business model now for revenue generation to support RChain Asia as a separate entity from very, very lucrative educational opportunities. So we've done a whole bunch of business research, market research about pricing for such things. We've also in the 7-day stretch starting last Sunday, we will have had conversations with 8 different venture capitalists to fund different things for RChain Co-op, RChain Asia, and also these initiatives in Korea. And we're submitting by request a grant proposal for $1.5 million to a major Korean conglomerate for a proof of concept of RChain to solve some of their major concerns concerning sustainability of all things. That pretty much sums it up. We also have people from Imperial College London, George Mason University, who are piling in, and we're also using this to leverage platform partners that possible platform partners that I've been in communication with for 6 months, who wanted to come into RChain but didn't yet feel that we were ready, and they now feel we're ready. So we're going to be getting a bunch of new platform partners on board without having to give them venture capital, as was the model previously with RVP and Pythia. So that is a 3-minute, 5-minute synopsis of about 20 minutes of stuff that's that I would love to report next time.
Sweet.
Pretty amazing, Jonathan.
We have a good team. When I started here, it was just me, June 19th. We only have 2 paid people in RChain Asia, but we now have a team of 10 people.
And I'd like to say as well that Jonathan never sleeps. It's 4 a.m. in the morning for him right now.
I nap.
Otters are different.
True that.
Lucky for us.
Oh, I should also mention that we have some very interesting things going on with monetizing our song. And I can't go into details, but in parallel with what Fabian has been doing, there's other stuff that I will talk more about in 2 weeks.
Ooh, can I talk with you about that sometime privately, Jonathan?
No, top secret.
Okay.
Kidding.
Yeah, can you talk about it now?
I think I said what needs to be said.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, is that it, guys, for guys and girls for the hangout today?
Is Robbie still with us?
He's muted on his phone. I think he's still here.
Yes, I am.
There you go.
Hi, Ravi. This is Jonathan again. I want to say that during the heyday of MySpace, I was both a professional musician and a record label owner. And MySpace, for me as an independent artist, was an invaluable service, not because of monetization, but because I was, for example, able, by virtue of leveraging the communities that I built with my band and my label, I was, for example, able to, with 2 weeks' notice, create a 3-week tour in Europe, and was able to get bookings in 1,000 to 5,000 venues, spaces, with perfectly appropriate artists by virtue of leveraging all of the data that was in MySpace. So when people think about music platforms and their functionality for artists, it's not just about the money making, it's also about the social capital that a really good platform allows. And there was a 2-year period where, as a musician, MySpace was absolutely invaluable, and it kind of disintermediated me from needing booking tour managers or booking agents or many other functions. And I don't think that most people really recognize the incredible service that MySpace provided.
Now, in addition, if the monetization had actually worked, the stickiness, and the monetization goes both ways, right? The artists need to feel that they can continue with their music production, and the fans, if there was a way for the fans to also show their loyalty to a preferred artist, and they made some benefit, like Dinner with Jonathan, for example, as a benefit that they got by listening to more of Jonathan's music, then if it had cut both ways, then yes. I think where we failed was the user experience was taken with more ads, and that's where I think the site was struggling. But I hear you. I mean, I think we've heard, as a developer platform head, I would engage with a lot of managers, of tour managers, and they would give us feedback on what features and functionalities that we had to develop, and we did. And you know, the comment that you gave me, I've heard this many times. Like, I can cut through, no more middlemen. I can just go and then perform, and the artist genuinely enjoyed it.
I was a MySpace member for a while too. I may still be. I haven't checked recently, but I enjoyed it a lot. And I think the weakness that I saw, there's two of them. One was graphically, it really was not very good. Secondly, that the curating function that you sometimes need on aggregations of people in the same line of work wasn't there. And so any kind of booking agent, manager, any kind of other interest coming from the outside, they wouldn't know what to do. It's a crowd of very mixed beings. And so I don't know how you introduce a curating function into something like that, but I think it needs one. So I guess Rupert Murdoch thought he got a deal, but I guess not.
Not really. Yeah.
No, and I want to jump in and just double down on what Jonathan said and regarding social capital, and that if that were put at the center of the strategy for the user, both the artists to organize their affinity communities, but then also users to be able to self-organize based on the artist affinity groups they're part of, and then you bring in the disintermediation of brands into that ecosystem, and you start to be able to create leverage with tradable resources based on affinity groups in a trustless blockchain situation. And just we're ready for the next iteration of what we glimpsed with MySpace. And it could happen right here. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, that was Nora's question to me earlier on. So I genuinely believe the technology exists, and then the consumers are also ready for it at this point in time. The audience are ready as well. So it's a matter of execution and signing on some really good artists to come on, and for them to first-hand experience what immersion technology plus what RChain has built.
So I have to ask this question because, you know, the co-op has been, well, we're suffering through crypto winter. So everyone in this space is worried about money, and that, of course, affects our co-op as well. The co-op is going through some management reforms, which I think should you join, which is fantastic. And I certainly hope that comes in, but that's part of the maturation process of this collectivity. And my question is, given that this is kind of, we're in our adolescence here, how do you feel about joining an organization that's like it's about optimism, not necessarily security, unless you see things that others don't see. But I'd like to hear just from your perspective how you weigh the risks involved in joining an organization that's in this stage of development.
Actually, it's a very apt question. It's a question for me that I always have wondered. The thing is, and again, hope is not a strategy. So I am clearly on board with that question. But it's at the time, it's during bear market that innovation truly happens. If you look at all the great companies that have come up in the past, this is a general statement. It's not pertaining to RChain in that sense, but I'm talking about bear market. Think of 2003, 2004 tech crunch, what happened. Then 2009, 2010, and there onwards, the crunch that happened. If you look at all the companies that emerged during that time, they were cash strapped, and truly innovative companies come out of that. And the best innovations have always come during the bear market. During bull market, when money is free flowing and everybody's happy, then the sort of focus goes away. But so that's the opportunity, right? And if you can translate that into hyper focus in the group, and everybody goes. I mean, you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid. You have to question, raise issues if you see any. But if you can all come together, then I think there's innovation that can happen. And that's what I really saw when I came in. I mean, I had read about, I saw all the curated videos that Chris has put together on the channel that helped me understand the technology to a certain degree. But then to firsthand come and experience it, that's when I was like blown away with the tech that you guys have actually built. So so I see that as an opportunity. Now, I'm no expert in crypto market. I have a fundamental understanding of blockchain technology. So I might not be the right person to talk about, is crypto going to come back up, or I don't know the answer to that question. But from a technology perspective, I see great innovation that you guys have actually come up with. And I see that as an opportunity.
Ravi, I would like to add some color to your comments. One of the reasons that I think that RChain Asia is working so well is that we're very consciously not focusing on the past. We're not, we acknowledge that mistakes were made. We acknowledge that there are problems, but we are very forward-looking, and we're looking for opportunities that we can create. And we are honest but optimistic, and I think that is why. So hope is not a strategy. I absolutely agree, but optimism and honesty and candor and hard work very well. And people are in love with our technology. There's no doubt about that.
Hello, Ravi. My name is Daryl. And I actually approached you on LinkedIn a day or two ago. I have a couple questions about, first of all, I think it's really exciting that you could potentially be on board. And I didn't even know about the MySpace connection until you mentioned it today. And that even makes me more excited, being a person who believes in music as the catalyst. So one question I have is, what experience and or feelings do you have regarding being the COO of a co-op?
I think Ravi's call might have dropped. I don't see it in the group.
Oh.
Which is too bad.
Oh, well. Next time.
Christian, did you have something to say about your visit to Immersion? That was never really brought up. Is this a good time or not?
What was the question, Jonathan?
It's me, Rudy.
What's the question?
You were going to say something about Immersion, or you were?
Yeah. You know, actually, I prefer to take that offline.
Okay.
Given the nature of, you know, being there, I'm happy to talk about it offline. If we can go ahead and end the call, if anyone else wants to talk about anything in open format.
All right.
Would anyone else like to talk about anything while we're on a live stream? No? Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and end the call. Give me a second. Be right back. I have to jump to my